All right, welcome back to Restauranttopia. Brian and I are very excited to bring to you. We have Roger Beaudoin of Restaurant Rockstars. And Roger, I have to say, we're more than pumped to have you on. We've been circling your wagon for a really long time, man. You guys up there put out some amazing content. And what, you have like 300 and some episodes of your podcast, right?
Yeah, we've recorded about 320. I've released 301, and I got some catching up to do on releasing some episodes
Wow.
because the guests keep coming, and I have a hard time saying no. So I keep interviewing really great guests, and they kind of stack up sometimes, but I need to catch up on releasing, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good problem
awesome.
to have. And I assure you, the listeners out there, if you Google restaurant podcasts, your podcast always pops up at the top of the list, Roger. So kudos to you, man, and all your success. And welcome to our show. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm excited to be here. I just love talking shop with fellow operators and with fellow industry professionals. So I'm just, again, psyched to be here.
Roger, I was going over the notes, and this topic is near and dear to my heart because I'm so big on teams. The show title will be How to Build the Dream Team. Enlighten our audience. How do we do that? Because I think every operator it's a constant struggle to get a team, let alone the dream team.
Imagine a perfect world where you can build a restaurant, open the doors, and make loads of money. Unfortunately, those days are over. It takes great leadership, hard work, and long hours to operate a successful restaurant. Together, we can make it happen. This is Restauranttopia.
Right. This is especially relevant now. It's a good time for this topic.
Well, as restaurant owner, operators, and managers, we all have a passion for the restaurant industry and for our restaurants, but I think that passion needs to translate also into people. And I'm not just talking about guests, I'm talking about the team, because the team is the foundation of any successful enterprise, restaurant, or other. So it really starts with an approach, because a lot of people talk about managers, and a lot of times the word delegation gets thrown around. And I'm a big believer in the word leaders and leadership and the word empowerment versus managers and delegate, because anyone can, attempt to be a manager, be promoted to a manager, tell people what to do. Anybody can tell somebody what to do. It's the rare person who takes leadership to heart, leads by example, sort of trains, nurtures, develops, recognizes and rewards great people, and then empowers them with additional responsibility, gives them a chance to fail, critiques their performance in a positive way, and then again, rewards positive achievement. So that's really the foundation of where it begins. So it's sort of a paradigm shift. It's a new approach. So building the dream team is all about reducing turnover in a high turnover business and getting the right people in your business. And there's another paradigm shift, hiring versus recruiting. And I know these are the most challenging times of all. We're hearing horror stories of, restaurant people trying to, steal other restaurant workers right out of the parking lot when they get out of their shifts. We know it's a desperate situation for a lot of operators, but the flip side of that and the real challenge is the people you hire may be the wrong people. And I believe that every business has three types of team members. They have the A team, of course, which goes without saying. You wish you had 20 more of these people. They have great personalities. They have a true desire to serve the public. They're reliable. They have experience. They really just dazzle your guests. And everyone wishes they had, filled a restaurant with that. And I was able to achieve that over time. Now, the B team is very similar. They have very similar attributes to the A players. The only challenge, well, it's not a challenge. The only thing they might be missing is a little bit of practical experience. Maybe they've never worked in a restaurant before, but they have the right approach, the right mindset. You can just tell in an interview that these people are just great personalities and they really care and they're going to do their best to do a great job. And then when you have these people shadow your veteran A players, then pretty soon they become A players. The C players are, those people that just show up for a paycheck. They really don't care that they're working in your restaurant. They're just there when they want to be there. They call in sick, they stay up late partying that night and they show up late. It's like, these are not the kind of people that are giving great experiences to your guests. And unfortunately, in this desperate situation, restaurant operators and managers are just hiring anything available wherever they can find them. And I do understand that the show must go on and that we have to deliver, hospitality to our guests. And the short staffing requires restaurants to be closed certain days of the week, or we're limiting hours now, even though business is booming back in restaurants again. So that is definitely the perfect storm. But recruiting is about taking your best people and saying, who do you know that isn't happy in their current position? They may or may not have experience in the restaurant business, but I never cared about experience. We could train for experience, but we couldn't train for personality and approach. So if I had an A player, I said, you know what, if you bring me someone that you think would fit, that just, works a job, but they're not particularly happy there. They have a manager that just tells them what to do, but isn't giving them more responsibility. There's really no opportunity to grow in that organization. Bring me that person, and I'm going to give you $100 just for bringing me that person. And then if that person lasts 3 months, I'm going to give that person $300 once they assimilate our training. And over time, very similarly to the experience operators have now. When I started my first restaurant, it was about 27 years ago. And there was a big hotel coming in my neighborhood. At the very same time, I'm opening my first restaurant, and I needed a lot of people. And this hotel was hiring, servers and bartenders and valet parkers and housekeeping staff. And I'm thinking, how am I possibly going to be able to staff this new restaurant when they're looking for like 200 people? And it wasn't a huge metropolitan area, so very slim pickings for staff. And I did the recruiting thing. And I did have one A player that happened to bring 3 other people that, again, weren't happy in their jobs, and they turned out to last. It's amazing. They actually stayed with me for at least 10 or 12 years apiece before they moved on to other things. So
is that a long time in the restaurant biz?
It's a huge amount of time, because they say the average tenure of a new restaurant employee today is somewhere like 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, I always shot for 10 months in my operational days. 10 months was my goal. If I could keep a line cook or a server for 10 months, I was happy. 10 years.
It's dog years. I mean, it's 1 year is like so 7 years in the rest of the world.
So true. So true.
Yeah. Well, the cost of that is prohibitively expensive, and you wouldn't know that until you actually do it, where you hire someone, they turn out to be a C player, and either they quit or you fire them. They last 2 or 3 or 4 months, and it costs you a couple, like $3,000 to $4,000 in lost time, productivity, and wages, and then the time and expense it takes to replace that person. And no restaurant really, unless you're the upper echelon of restaurant groups that can afford to throw $4,000 away in a couple of months on an employee. So
Cornell actually put a figure on that, Roger. They said it's like $5,684 per employee to turn over.
Wow!
And I think when you look at things,
risen then for sure.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, as of like 2 years ago, right? It might even be more now. Who knows? But it's like it's very vague and idealistic, right? The lost productivity and everything. But I trust the folks at Cornell. They do some extensive research, man. They thought of this through, and I think a lot of times it comes down to it. It's funny because we don't reward players because it's too expensive, or we don't train because it's too expensive. But we're short-sighted in the fact that if I let this person walk after I've onboarded them, it's going to cost me $5,600. And when you look through that lens, all of a sudden, maybe that extra week of training is worth it. Maybe that little incentives are worth it.
Well, there's the key. You just said the magic word. It's all about training. And a lot of restaurants that I've come across over my lengthy career in this business might do the basics of training. They onboard someone and then they just turn them loose and let whatever happens. And I've always believed that training should happen each and every single day before every single shift. There should be a daily pre-shift, front and back of house. Sometimes you can include the two. And I'm not talking about a half an hour. It can be 5 to 10 minutes, but it's all about a strategy and a game plan and how we're going to interact with our guests tonight and the things we're going to tell them that let them know what's unique and special and different about our organization or our company. And then I had a very strong belief then, as I do now, that the restaurant business is really show business. It's entertainment. And there's a reason why, some of the best restaurant service can be found in Los Angeles, because 99% of the people working in those restaurants are actor and actress wannabes, and they're practicing their craft and they're dazzling their guests at the table as if it was a performance. And I took that to heart so long ago. And I taught my staff every single day, when the door opens for business tonight, it's like the curtain goes up and it's showtime and you're all actors on stage. And we're here to, demonstrate our unique personalities and dazzle our guests and treat them as if they're a regular or repeat customer, even if they're a first-time visitor. And we're here to take them on what I call the magical journey. You're going to tell them everything that's unique and special and different about our place, and you're going to engage them in conversation. And you're not just going to serve them food and drink. You're going to give them an event they will remember, which then translates into social media posts and camera phones coming out and positive reviews online and all that, not to mention a happier staff, a more motivated staff, the team chemistry. We used to call it the culture of hospitality, family, and fun when I ran these restaurants, because hospitality, again, is the foundation of our business. That's why we're all here. and family. You want your guests to feel like family, you want your staff to feel like family, and you want everyone just to have fun. And that was our culture. It's going to be different in every restaurant, of course, but a lot of those core beliefs, I think, translate to just about any restaurant.
I think it's interesting what you just said is alleviates so many problems in the future, that training, that experience with that foundation of hospitality. I mean, it just, what I was thinking about, okay, you have a great experience, so you're not writing a bad review. You have a great experience, so you're not complaining to the manager. You have a great experience, so you are coming back. You have a great experience, so you're tipping your staff well, and then they're going to stay longer. It almost builds upon itself, just like the death spiral builds upon itself of a restaurant going out of business. And that's one thing I want to convey to our listeners is this is so important. It is not just the Cornell $5,600 that you're losing when you don't do this with your staff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely
It's
true.
the experience that the customer is getting is also diminished by a C player. So that's why you got to have an A team. So how do I find my A team in addition to offering my current A players an incentive, which I love. I love that trick as a pro move to really drive in other like-minded people.
Yeah, I think everyone comes in contact with interesting personalities in our daily lives. You might be out at the mall shopping and you get a great service experience from someone, and you might pass them a business card saying, hey, I'm not trying to steal you from this place, but if you're planning on moving on anywhere, if you're interested, talk to me. And then, in interviews, I always asked interesting questions, not the standard interview questions, but questions that were very hard for someone to answer as if they knew what I wanted to hear. It was, what would your 7th grade English teacher say about you? Or what are you most proud of? What achievement in your life are you most proud of, and why? Stuff that really gets to the heart of what motivates a person and what their pride is. And that just speaks volumes about how they're going to approach their position in your business. So that was part of it. And then once we had that dream team, as much fun as it was to work in our restaurants, it was still about recognition and rewards. And, I mentioned that word empowerment earlier, and I was really big on training everyone to have my back and to treat the restaurant as if they owned it and they had to pay for it. So there was an element of teaching them, there are a lot of expenses and a lot of risks in this business, and each of you can make an impact on that, and you can make positive experience. And through the recognition and rewards, giving people more responsibility, that was really my exit strategy, where I ran these restaurants for 20 plus years, but I didn't work there. I put systems in place in the beginning, worked on my business, and then decided very quickly that I like being a customer in my restaurant. I don't want to work there. Sure, I'm going to have the big financial picture, and I really got interested in and involved in the marketing side of my business, but the day-to-day minutia, I hired very good people that were then empowered to run the business as if they owned it, and then the recognition rewards part, we had a really exciting program called Difference Dollars I could tell you all about that really up-leveled the entire organization and raised morale, and people were just really excited week to week for who was going to win this award. So that was fun too.
I think that's an art form there. I was talking to an operator the other day, and we were talking about, raising top line sales by just a couple percent, maybe adding a dessert or a coffee at the end of the bill.
Oh, yes.
And this operator is like, I'm going to give away gift cards, and they had a little pre-shift, 3 to 5 minutes, but they couldn't get their servers excited. Like no one cared about the gift card. Right. So what is it maybe you did differently? Like that really got to, because you're talking seasoned veterans, like, they're not trying to hear it. Right. And maybe they were C players. Maybe that's the problem. But, that being said, what kind of incentivizing tactics did you have that helped out?
Well, it's really interesting in that, it's typical to give people the best shifts where they're going to make the most amount of money, and people have to earn that. So that's just the starting point. But we had one really particularly successful fun incentive, and it was kind of a team building exercise, but it also created a healthy competition, and it was as simple as playing bingo. And everybody in their life at one point has played the game of bingo, where you're trying to connect the squares, you're trying to do a diagonal or a sideways or up or down and just get the pieces that fit. So I created bingo cards every single week for my team, and we do it on weekends. Maybe it was a Friday night. Sometimes we do it in the middle of the week, but we did it regularly. And in each of the squares on everyone's bingo card were things we really wanted to sell, our most profitable items, items that I consider to be our signature items or hooks. Maybe we brought in a bunch of seafood that week. It didn't all sell, but we had to move the seafood before it perished. Whatever it was, each week I would adjust. And we had a lot of cash cows as well, those items that have high perceived value by the guest, but they cost you very little to serve. Therefore, they're almost pure profit. And every restaurant needs as many of those as possible. So we loaded the bingo card with those. And then I turned my team on every night or whatever night we did it and said, okay, the first person that gets a bingo wins this great prize. And the prizes came from suppliers, of course. I had lots of different suppliers. Every restaurant spends a ton of money on products and services with bigger companies sometimes than themselves. And I had all these prizes that those companies would give to me because we obviously bought a lot of product from them. And therefore, I could use it to recognize and reward my team. So it was something that never got tired. Everyone loved going out and playing bingo, and they would go to their tables and they'd make these recommendations, and all they had to do was show me with their guest checks, okay, I filled this square and this square and this square, and the first person that did that would obviously win a prize. And we did that for years, and my restaurant is still doing that to this day, even though I don't own it anymore. So, something simple like that. And you can think up 1,000 different ideas based on something else. It doesn't have to be an original idea. It just has to be something that catches their attention, that makes it fun, that gives them a goal and creates a healthy competition.
That's such a unique idea, and it gamifies the system. And I think once you gamify the system, it really gets people engaged, and it motivates you to take that extra step to upsell the appetizer. That maybe training is a start, but the motivation is also needed.
Let me give you one more idea. So I talked about the importance of daily pre-shifts. And again, 5 to 10 minutes, give you a strategy, a game plan. Never wing it at a table and just show up. It's like you need a strategy. It's like any major professional sports team. They have team huddles regularly. They talk about their strategy. Every NFL game, the Super Bowl included, has regular, okay, this is the play. We're going to huddle up. You know how it is. So we did that too in the restaurant. But we also had a program called How to Turn $100 into $1,000. And I would do this once a month, okay? And it was based on a staff training system I created called Sales Stars, and that was the approach. Everyone had to be super knowledgeable, product knowledge, restaurant knowledge. They had to be obviously trained in service and hospitality as well as suggestive selling techniques. But once a month, I would go to the bar or the petty cash drawer and I'd take out $100, and it would be one $20 bill and maybe two tens and a bunch of fives, and the rest would be $1 bills. And I'd shuffle this stack of money randomly and I'd put it on a dining room table. We'd have our training sessions in the dining room. And then I would bring in what I would consider to be, I mentioned show business earlier, right? So every production, whether it's TV or plays or movies, has props. And a prop is something that the production uses to bring the story or the scene to life for the audience. And that's how we approached everything in the restaurant. The guests are the audience, your actors on stage, and we're going to use props to bring the show and the food and drink to life. So you might say I would cover the table with a dessert and a bottle of wine and some retail merchandise, whether that be a t-shirt that we sell, or maybe it was packaged foods to go because we had a retail food program outside the restaurant, that sort of thing. Table tents, menus, concert posters because we had live entertainment. There are like 10, 15 items on the table. And then we would do role playing. And I would randomly assign my staff. I might have 30 people in the room, and I would pick on, Sally, and you're going to be the host, and you're going to greet the customer at the front door. And Molly, you're going to be the server that waits on Paul, the guest. And John, you're the bartender. And literally, I would just randomly call on people, use your props, bring the experience to life for the guest, make some suggestions, and let's see what your technique is. And if they did a really great job, you could take a bill off the stack. So maybe you got a $1 bill, maybe you got a 10, a 5, a 20. And we would do this for a half an hour, and people would just take money until the money was gone. And they love that too. And so anyway, the $100 for the next couple of nights, it's like if sales didn't rise each night for $1,000 above and beyond what they typically would be, because people were super motivated, this was a reinforcer for what they were typically doing in every shift. But it was just like light a new fire under them every month. And they love doing that too. So some people would consider that, okay, you got 30 people in a room for half an hour and there's labor cost in that. I never looked at anything as a cost. I always looked at it as an investment, and there you go. And didn't it pay off? So for $100, I probably got $3,000 return back for the next couple of days, and then they would continue to sell. And so, that was just really simple idea, but people loved it. It was fun, and the guests had a greater experience.
That is cool. I think
Yeah.
that's a huge value add. I think the training, and again, the Chick-fil-A who has an A player maybe got a B or C player from the mall. They turned that person into an A player with training, probably a B player because they probably had the right attitude and just needed the training and the additional resources. But if you think about, you already have some B players on your team. How do you elevate them to an A player? It's through training.
It is for sure. And shadowing, of course. And interestingly enough, I had a chance to catch up with one of my former veteran servers the other day on a Zoom call, and I hadn't spoken to her in a couple of years. And, she was just reiterating to me how much fun it was working at that restaurant and how, whenever a new person was hired, she really appreciated the opportunity of being the person that trained someone. And she reminded me, because I hadn't thought about this in a while, but it was like we used to have new people shadow 2 or 3 different veterans, because everyone, again, has a unique, different personality, a different approach, and one isn't necessarily better than another. They're just different. But when you have one person shadow 2 or 3 people on 2 or 3 shifts before they're given an opportunity to go, they're going to use their own personality and their own approach. But those things definitely rubbed off in a positive way. They see how we approach tables and how we interact with guests and how we make friends and how we treat every first timer as if they're an old friend or they're a regular visitor. You want everyone to feel like they're the most important person in the room, even if they just walked in the door and you don't know who they are and they're there for the very first time. And I think there's some magic in that. And it's a real skill set. But it really comes from caring and that personality I talked about, because a C player can't do that, but an A or a B certainly can if they have the right approach and a desire to serve the public. So that's what it's about.
Oddly enough, Dave Ross and I talked about this the other day in an episode that hasn't dropped yet, but we were talking about the importance of training as far as like reducing turnover too. So very, very congruent with what we're talking about here. And I love this topic. But we were talking about the mistake that I always made is I took my best player and I automatically made the new hire shadow them. But then what I realized recently is that my best player wasn't always the best trainer. A lot of times they couldn't explain why they were the best, or maybe they didn't even want to train. Maybe they're like Ryan Tannehill with the Titans and don't want to mentor the young quarterback coming in, right?
Sure.
Because they're insecure or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think operators got to be very careful about who they select, because your best performer isn't always your best trainer.
This is true. Good point there. Absolutely. Yeah, not everyone can teach. Someone can do, but they can't necessarily teach. But overall, I think just the idea of shadowing is a really great start. But again, we can't forget about the importance of product and restaurant knowledge, and that they really need to do their own study time on their own and then learn what they can on the job. But if you don't know, then you can't sell. And it was always a pet peeve of mine. I never wanted anyone to say to a guest, I don't know. I wanted them to have an answer. I wanted them to be so knowledgeable that they could answer most any question, because guests aren't throwing curveballs at you. They're asking basic things about your restaurant and about your menu that you should know. So, I never want to inconvenience a guest by saying, oh, let me go ask my manager, or I'll go get the answer. It just shows that the place isn't dialed and it's not running on all 8 cylinders.
One of my biggest pet peeves there. Yeah, it's true. They have to leave the table to ask a question, right? So that being said, Roger, when we talk to operators in our stratosphere, in the oftentimes we talk about the importance of training in orientation and the onboarding process in general, and they agree that it's of the utmost priority, but they're like, we don't have time for that. So what advice would you give them if they're midstream operation? Let's say they've been open 5-10 years, they got to completely like revolutionize their system in a tough time that we're in now. How would you recommend going about doing that? I know it's a tough question. I'm sorry.
Not really.
Good.
I always recognized people and moved people up quickly in my organization. And one of the things that really differentiated me from my competition, and I don't think I've ever seen this in another restaurant, and there's that paradigm shift again. Most restaurants hire people for specific positions that have very delineated job responsibilities. We all know that a host answers the phone, greets customers at the door, seats them at tables, makes them comfortable, that sort of thing. We know that bussers clean and reset tables and then communicate with the host when a table's ready. We know what servers and bartenders do. That's the normal, right, model for a restaurant. In our restaurants, we cross-trained people right from the get-go. Everybody had product and restaurant knowledge. Everyone could go to the point of sale system and enter an order. Even a busser, could notice that the lady's glass of wine is empty at the table, approach her, ask if she enjoyed the wine, if she'd like another glass. And while the server's in the kitchen, the busser's literally at the POS. It was like choreographed service. And then when anyone got sick or got hit by a bus or something went sideways, I had people that I could call on front and back of house. I had dishwashers that could jump in and be fry cooks, and I had hosts that could, be servers on the fly, and servers could become bartenders. And again, there's another investment versus a cost. But think about over the long term, how much really that made me an additional income and saved me in headaches and time and frustration and money also. Not to mention the fact that I guess our guests were dazzled when they saw a busser that could literally take an order and get her another glass of wine while the server's not there. It was backing each other up. It was teamwork.
No doubt. And there's another layer there too with the empathy piece, right? Because we talk about the great divide between positions in front of the house, back of the house specifically. And it happens between bussers and servers and bartenders and servers as well. There's a rift there. But that cross-training allows them an insight to see what it's like in the other world. So maybe they won't be so quick to criticize. Maybe they'll be quicker to support rather than stand off, right?
The goal really is not to look at this as jobs in a restaurant. It's to try to build careers and give people a passion for the industry. Whether they have a formal education or not is not important, because you can literally create a restaurant empire without a college education just by learning and applying yourself. And this career can take you anywhere in the world. And I could tell you stories about my very first employee starting as a 15-year-old dishwasher, stayed with me 15 years, had a passion, really wanted to learn as much about the business as he could, became kitchen manager in 2 of my restaurants. And then when he left me 15 years later, it was only to open his own restaurant. No college education, just a passion and a desire to learn, and a goal, a burning desire to have his own restaurant. And so we were always on the lookout for people that had talent. So one more story really quick. When my kids were really small, like just born up until the time they were 2 or 3, their daycare provider had a real excellent way about him and how he cared for the children and how he cared for the parents as they came in. Like, you could just tell he was just a stellar person. So I hired this person to be a part-time host in my restaurant. And God, that was 20 something years ago. He is still the general manager of my flagship restaurant to this day, even though I don't own that. So he went from daycare to becoming the GM, and now he runs a 350 seat restaurant. And
the same as daycare, isn't it?
Yeah, you just a little bigger, but you get the idea. It's like you recognize talent and potential in people, and then there's that empowerment thing. There's that leadership thing versus manager telling you what to do. So we had a lot of success in moving people up in a quick amount of time.
Amazing tips, Roger. I think the listeners are really got a huge takeaway here on how to build an A team and alleviate a lot of the issues that operators are experiencing. Where can people find you, and are you working on anything interesting right now?
Yeah. Lastly, my biggest project is a restaurant staff training digital application, which is completely customizable to any restaurant. I have a team of people that is onboarding, and this trains in menu knowledge, in restaurant knowledge, table layouts, sales training, management training, menu profit maximization. It's like everything loaded into an app. And there's also some guest-facing features too. So that can be found at a whole different website, and that is srvnow.com. That stands for Study Restaurant Variety. So it's srvnow.com. And to find me, I'm at restaurantrockstars.com. And if you have any particular questions, again, I love talking shop with operators. You can reach out to me personally at Roger, ROGER, at restaurantrockstars.com.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it. All of Roger's information will be in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening. Thanks for joining us, Roger. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Outstanding stuff, man. Thank you.
Outstanding. Absolutely.
You're very welcome.
Hey, this is a high quality pod. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Adios. Thank you for listening to Restaurantopia. The gratitude that we have for each and every one of you spending your precious time to listen to this podcast is immeasurable. Please make sure to tell a friend about this podcast. And also, if you have any feedback for us, visit us on restaurantopia.com and drop us a line. You can also subscribe on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. Thank you and have a great day.
We are excited to announce the Restauranttopia VIP Text Club. Join by texting the word podcast to 844-928-4257. You will get access to exclusive content, industry news, deals, announcements, pro tips, and more. The VIP Text Club is an exclusive community of independent restaurant owners and professionals. Join today. Message and data rates may apply. Please check our website for our terms of service and privacy policy.